Socioeconomic and political system regulated by the state was structurally dismantled. So what was dismantled? Let's see what was dismantled. The state was dismantled by the first state. And firstly, government was captured. And dismantled, obviously. Which doesn't mean that, that dismantled, after dismantling, part of that government and its structure, or part of that state and its structure wasn't reused, but it was reused in a different structure. That's one thing. For example, in a subcontinent, for example. Obviously, education system was dismantled. So people, obviously over a period of time, but with dismantling of the education system, the elite became powerless. Not just powerless, but because that part of this elite was part of the bureaucracy and the structure of the government and state. Um, but overnight, this elite, which was um, educational elite as well as elite in the sense of government, became non-elite, or educated people overnight became uneducated in a sense, because totally new system of education was introduced, which is so one example of this is like Persian, for example, in our system was an official language, now Persian. So knowing Persian was important to get a job in a position, etc. Now, as they say, after the dismantling of that education system, Persian became generally, obviously, worthless, and we have that from those days, I guess. This saying that "Padho Farsi becho tel," meaning you can't get any worthwhile job, or you can't earn living by studying Persian. The same with Arabic. So the whole elite, educational elite, became uneducated in the eyes of the new rulers overnight. So so Urdu was promoted against Persian and Arabic. And a new elite was created, and obviously, ultimately, English became the sign of education. And I have, I remember, this example is not from Indian subcontinent, but it is an example from Mauritania, which I heard from one of the scholars, that his grandfather was a great scholar. The French colonialist, the French imperialist power, which was ruling Mauritania at the time, they for Hajj entourage of Mauritania, I guess they appointed one of the great scholars of the time, Muhammad Ali Abdul Wadud. Was not just a scholar in Islamic, great scholar in Islamic uh, disciplines, but also in Arabic language, literature, uh, philosophy, logic. I mean, you name it. One of the rare scholars, even in that part of the world where scholars are, even to this day, are produced in abundance, not just men but women as well. Anyway, when they issued him French passport, I mean, there was French government there, so in the profession or education they wrote illiterate, and that's because they wasn't educated in French, and according to French system. So literacy and illiteracy and education, and so overnight the whole thing changes, and obviously economic system was dismantled. before British came into India, um, India was self-sufficient economy. In fact, before British came, India was a self-sufficient economy and hardly imported anything from Britain. But in a few decades, it became basically a colony producing raw material for British economy, and that then finished products were actually imported to um, India. So, and its indigenous machines and industry was totally dismantled, which was much superior to the British industry at the time. But in a few decades, the indigenous production system and industry was totally dismantled, and India became economically dependent on British and the world economic system created by it, and it is, in a sense, to this day. Um, and finally, you have dismantling of political systems. So government was overthrown, and state institutions were dismantled, and new elite was created, which was spearheaded by small elite from the Britain, but then local. Uh, Either the old elite was bought and co-opted, or the new elite was created, which was subservient to and whose interests were subservient to the British interests, etc. So these are some of the changes which happen. So with the education system, you have new self, new individuality, new ideal, new economic system, new economic ideals. Obviously, social system is much more entrenched in society, so it takes more time. And at no point, the British were able to easily dismantle the old system. And the old system ultimately produced the resistance to modernity, etc., and created new institutions to fight that colonization and modernization and westernization, etc. Okay, so these are